Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So, an Irish farmer was walking along the boundary between his and his neighbor's fields when he spotted his neighbor carrying 2 sheep in his arms. "Tony," he called, "are you going to shear those sheep?" "I am not," the neighbor replied. "They're both for me." So I, being an Irish Catholic, decided it was time to cleanse my soul. I went into the confessional box after many years of being away from the Catholic Church. Inside, I found a fully equipped bar with Guinness on tap. On one wall, there was a row of decanters with fine Irish whiskey and Waterford crystal glasses. On the other wall was a dazzling array of the finest cigars and chocolates. When the priest came in, I said to him, "Father, forgive me, for it's been a very long time since I've been to confession, but I must first admit that the confessional box is much more inviting than it used to be." He replied, "You moron, you're on my side." So my Irish buddy came over the other night to hang out. I asked if he wanted a beer. He said, "Sure, what do you got?" I told him, "How about a Budweiser?" He answered, "No thanks. Drinking that's worse than going down on your own sister." "How's that?" I asked. He said, "Well, at least your sister only tastes like piss for a minute." So an Irishman took his son to the bar on his birthday to buy him his first drink. The father ordered his son a stout, a classic Irish beer. But to his surprise, the son didn't like it at all. The father, not wanting to disappoint his son, decided to drink it himself and ordered an ale for his son. Again, the son didn't like it, and the father decided to try a different approach by ordering a cider. But it seemed that the son didn't like any of the drinks his father ordered, whether it was lager, cider, or cream ale. Each time, the father would try to convince his son to give the drink a chance, but the son was stubborn and refused to drink them. After several failed attempts, the father was feeling frustrated. He decided to order a whiskey, a drink that no real man could refuse. But to his surprise, he didn't like any of the Irish whiskeys the father ordered. The old man drank them all, hoping to find one that his son would enjoy. By the time they left the bar, the father had sampled numerous drinks and was quite intoxicated. He could barely push his son's stroller home. So an Irishman was in New York, patiently waiting to cross a busy street. There was a traffic cop manning the crossing. The cop stopped after a few minutes and told those waiting to cross the road. "Okay, pedestrians," he said, "let's go." The Irishman stood waiting, growing more and more frustrated. After 5 minutes, he shouts to the cop, "The pedestrians crossed ages ago. When's it time for the Catholics?" So, Paddy phoned the airline to book a flight. The operator asked him how many people would be flying with him. Paddy replied, "How should I know? It's your damn plane." So a car full of Irish nuns is sitting at a traffic light in downtown Dublin when a bunch of rowdy drunks pull up alongside of them. "Hey, show us your tits, ya bloody penguins," shouts one of the drunks. Quite shocked, Mother Superior turns to Sister Mary Immaculata and says, "I don't think they know who we are. Show them your cross." Sister Mary Immaculata rolls down her window and shouts, "Piss off, ya damn little wankers, before I come over there and rip your balls off." Sister Mary Immaculata then rolls up her window, looks back at Mother Superior, quite innocently, and asks, "Did that sound cross enough?" So a Welshman, Scotsman, and Irishman meet for the first time. The Welshman is asked his name and says, "I was born on St. David's Day, so my parents called me David." The Scotsman was surprised. "Well, that is truly amazing. I was born on St. Andrew's Day, so they called me Andrew." The Irishman replied that he was truly staggered that all three in the one room were called after the day they were born on. "So, you're called Patrick then?" commented the Welshman. "No," replied the Irishman, "it's Pancake." So Paddy is planning to marry and asks his family doctor how he could tell if his bride-to-be is still a virgin. His doctor says, "Aye, Paddy, all Irish use three things for what we call a do-it-yourself virginity test kit: a small can of red paint, a small can of blue paint, and a shovel." Paddy asks, "Aye, and what do I do with these things, doctor?" The doctor replies, "Before you climb into bed on your wedding night, you paint one of your balls red and the other ball blue. If she says, 'That's the strangest pair of balls I ever seen,' you hit her with the shovel." So an Irishman is at a bar, chatting with the barmaid. He asks, "Can I take you home with me tonight?" The barmaid replies, "Sure, but I should warn you, I'm on my menstrual cycle." The Irishman grins and says, "No worries at all. I brought my bicycle too." So, Muhammad went to school in Ireland. "What's your name?" asked the teacher. "Muhammad," he replied. "You're in Ireland now," replied the teacher. "So from now on you will be known as Mike." Muhammad returned home after school. "How was your day, Muhammad?" his mother asked. "My name is not Muhammad. I'm in Ireland, and now my name is Mike." "Are you ashamed of your name? Are you trying to dishonor your parents, your heritage, your religion? Shame on you." And his mother beat the shit out of him. Then she called his father, who beat the shit out of him again. The next day, Muhammad returned to school. The teacher saw all of his fresh bruises. "What happened to you, Mike?" she asked. The kid replied, "Well, shortly after becoming an Irishman, I was attacked by two damn Arabs." So, three Irishmen are sitting in the pub window seat, watching the front door of the brothel over the road. The local Methodist pastor appears and quickly goes inside. "Would you look at that?" says the first Irishman. "Didn't I always say what a bunch of hypocrites they are?" No sooner are the words out of his mouth than a rabbi appears at the door, knocks, and goes inside. Another one trying to fool everyone with pious preaching and stupid hats. They continue drinking their beer roundly, condemning the vicar and the rabbi when they see their own Catholic priest knock on the door. "Ah, now that's sad," says the third Irishman. "One of the girls must have died." So Putin was sitting in his office when the phone rang. "Hello, Mr. Putin," said a voice with a heavy Irish accent. "This is Paddy Down at the Harp Pub in County Clare. I'm calling to let you know we've officially declared war on you." Putin raised an eyebrow. "Well, Paddy, that's very serious news. How big is your army?" Paddy paused to think. "Right now, there's myself, my cousin, my neighbor, Seamus, and the entire darts team from the pub. That makes 8 of us." Putin smirked. "I must tell you, Paddy, I have 100,000 men in my army ready to move on my command." Paddy gasped. "I'll have to ring you back." The next day, the phone rang again. "Mr. Putin, the war is still on. We've managed to get some equipment." "Oh, and what equipment would that be, Paddy?" "Well, we've got 2 combines, a bulldozer, and Murphy's tractor." Putin chuckled. Paddy, I have 6,000 tanks, 5,000 armored vehicles, and now 150,000 men in my army. Saints preserve us, Paddy said. I'll have to get back to you. Sure enough, the next day, Paddy called again. Mr. Putin, the war is still on. We're airborne now. We modified Jackie McLaughlin's ultralight with a couple of shotguns, and 4 boys from the Shamrock Bar have joined us. Put inside. Paddy, I have 100 bombers, 200 fighter jets, and missile defense systems around my bases. And since we last spoke, my army has grown to 200,000. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Paddy groaned. I'll have to ring you back. The following morning, Paddy called again. Good morning, Mr. Putin. I'm sorry to say we've had to call off the war. Putin leaned back in his chair. Really, I'm sorry to hear that. Why the sudden change of heart? Well, Paddy said, we had a long chat over a few pints of Guinness, and we finally realized there's no way we could feed 200,000 Russian prisoners. So one day, an Irishman walks into a pharmacy, pulls out a small bottle and a teaspoon from his pocket, and approaches the chemist. He pours some liquid onto the teaspoon and offers it to the chemist. Could you taste this for me, please? The chemist takes the teaspoon, tastes the liquid, swirls it around, and swallows. Well, asks the Irishman anxiously. The chemist replies, no, it doesn't taste like anything unusual. Oh, that's a relief, says the Irishman. The doctor told me to come here and get my urine tested for sugar. So an Irish girl tells her mom she decided to be a prostitute. Her mom says, a what? The daughter says, a prostitute. Then the mom says, thank God. I thought you said a Protestant. So an Irish woman of advanced age visited her physician to ask his advice in reviving her husband's libido. What about trying Viagra? Asked the doctor. Not a chance, she said. He won't even take an aspirin. Not a problem, replied the doctor. Give him an Irish Viagra. It's when you drop the Viagra tablet into his coffee. He won't even taste it. Give it a try and call me in a week to let me know how things went. It wasn't a week later when she called the doctor, who directly inquired as to her progress. The poor dear exclaimed, "Oh, Jesus, it was horrid. Just terrible, doctor." "Really? What happened?" asked the doctor. "Well, I did as you advised and slipped it in his coffee, and the effect was almost immediate. He jumped straight up with a twinkle in his eye and with his pants bulging fiercely. With one swoop of his arm, he sent the cups and tablecloth flying, ripped my clothes to tatters, and took me then and there passionately on the tabletop. It was a nightmare, I tell you, an absolute nightmare." "Why so terrible?" asked the doctor. "Do you mean the loving your husband provided wasn't good?" The old lady replied, "It was the best time I've had in 25 years. But I'm sure I'll never be able to show my face in Starbucks again." So a man stumbles up to the only other patron in a bar and asks if he could buy him a drink. "Why, of course," comes the reply. The first man then asks, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Ireland," replies the second man. The first man responds, "You don't say, I'm from Ireland too. Let's have another round to Ireland." "Of course," replies the second man. Curious, the first man then asks, "Where in Ireland are you from?" "Dublin," comes the reply. "I can't believe it," says the first man. I'm from Dublin too. Let's have another drink to Dublin. Of course, replies the second man. Curiosity again strikes, and the first man asks, "What school did you go to?" "St. Mary's," replies the second man. "I graduated in '62. "This is unbelievable," the first man says. "I went to St. Mary's, and I graduated in '62 too." About that time, in comes one of the regulars and sits down at the bar. "What's been going on?" he asks the bartender. "Nothing much," replies the bartender. "The O'Malley twins are drunk again." So the wise old Mother Superior from County Tipperary was dying. The nuns gathered around her bed, trying to make her comfortable. They gave her some warm milk to drink, but she refused it. One of the nuns took the glass back to the kitchen. Remembering a bottle of Irish whiskey received as a gift the previous Christmas, she opened it and poured a generous amount into the warm milk. Back at Mother Superior's bed, she held the glass to her lips. Mother Superior drank a little, then a little more. Before they knew it, she had drunk the whole glass down to the last drop. "Mother," the nuns pleaded, "please give us some wisdom before you die." She raised herself up in bed with a pious look on her face and said, "Don't sell that cow." So, 3 guys, 1 Irish, 1 English, and 1 Scottish, are out walking along the beach together one day. They come across a lantern and a genie pops out of it. "I will give you each 1 wish. That's 3 wishes in total," says the genie. The Scottish guy says, "I am a fisherman. My dad's a fisherman. His dad was a fisherman. And my son will be one too. I want all the oceans full of fish for all eternity." So, with a blink of the genie's eye, poof, the oceans were teeming with fish. The Englishman was amazed, so he said, "I want a wall around England, protecting her, so that no one will get in for all eternity." Again, with a blink of the genie's eye, poof, there was a huge wall around England. The Irishman asks, "I'm very curious. Please tell me more about this wall." The genie explains, "Well, it's about 150 feet high, 50 feet thick, protecting England so that nothing can get in or out." The Irishman says, "Please fill it up with water." So it was raining hard, and a big puddle had formed in front of an Irish pub. An old man stood beside the puddle, holding a stick with a string on the end, and jiggled it up and down in the water. A curious gentleman asked what he was doing. "Fishing," replied the old man. Poor old fool, thought the gentleman, so he invited the old man to have a drink in the pub. Feeling he should start some conversation while they were sipping their whiskey, the gentleman asked, "And how many have you caught?" The old man smiled and said, "You're the 8th." So an Irish priest is driving down to New York and gets stopped for speeding in Connecticut. The state trooper smells alcohol on the priest's breath and then sees an empty wine bottle on the floor of the car. He says, "Sir, have you been drinking?" "Just water," says the priest. The trooper says, "Then why do I smell wine?" The priest looks at the bottle and says, "Good Lord, he's done it again." So 2 Irish farmers are walking down a road towards the pub after a long day's work when they hear a motorcycle behind them. They are totally shocked to find that when the bike passes them, the biker is headless. The 2 men look at each other and shrug. They continue down the road because the call of the pub is getting stronger. As they go, a cyclist comes up behind them, and, on passing them, he too is seen to be headless. The 2 old men shake their heads and continue to walk down the road. After a few minutes, Mick, who's walking along the inside, turns to his companion and says, "You know what seemeth. I be thinking that maybe you should be carrying that scythe on your other shoulder." So, an Englishman, an Irishman, and an American are stranded on an island until they find a genie. The genie explains to them that usually he'd give them 3 wishes, but because there's 3 people and they all found him equally, that everyone gets 1 wish. First, the Englishman makes his wish. "Well, I've been stranded on this island for 2 years now, so I wish to go back home to my family in England." The genie grants his wish, and the Englishman disappears with a poof. Now, it's time for the American to make his wish. "Well, I've been stranded on this island for 2 years as well, so I wish to go back home to my family in America." And the genie grants his wish, and the American disappears with a poof. Next, the Irishman makes his wish. "Well, I'm real lonely on this island, so I wish my 2 buddies were back here with me." 6 retired Irishmen were playing poker in O'Leary's apartment when Paddy Murphy loses 500 pounds on a single hand, clutches his chest, and drops dead at the table. Showing respect for their fallen brother, the other 5 continue playing standing up. Michael O'Connor looks around and asks, "Oh, my boys, someone gots to tell Paddy's wife." "Who will it be?" They draw straws. Paul Gallagher picks the short one. They tell him to be discreet, be gentle, don't make a bad situation any worse. "Discreet. I'm the most discreet Irishman you'll ever meet. Discretion is me middle name. Leave it to me." Gallagher goes over to Murphy's house and knocks on the door. Mrs. Murphy answers and asks what he wants. Gallagher declares, "Your husband just lost 500 pounds and is afraid to come home." "Tell him to drop dead," says Murphy's wife. "I'll go tell him," says Gallagher. So 2 Irish mothers, Kate and Lorna, were talking about their sons. Kate says, "My Patrick is such a saint. He works hard, doesn't smoke, and he hasn't so much as looked at a woman in over 2 years. Lorna responds, "Well, my Francis is a saint himself. Not only hasn't he not looked at a woman in over 3 years, but he hasn't touched a drop of liquor in all that time." "My word," says Kate, "you must be so proud." "I am," announces Lorna, "and when he's paroled next month, I'm going to throw him a big party." So 2 Irish pilots were attempting to land their jet, but the runway was the shortest they had ever landed on. Paddy, the chief pilot, slammed on the brakes the minute they hit the runway. The plane skidded, the brakes squealed, and the 2 pilots fought desperately with the controls until the jet finally came to a stop just before the end of the runway. "Jesus, Seamus," said Paddy to his co-pilot. "That was close. They really need to make this runway longer. We nearly went off the end." "Yeah, but Paddy," said the co-pilot, "look at how wide it is." So 2 Irishmen are looking through a mail-order catalog. Paddy says, "Look at these gorgeous women. The prices are reasonable too." Mick agrees. "I'm ordering one right now." 3 weeks later, Paddy says to Mick, "Has your woman turned up yet?" "No," said Mick, "but it shouldn't be long now, though. Her clothes arrived yesterday." So an Irishman walked into a shop and said, "Can I have some Irish sausages, please?" The assistant looked at him and said, "Are you Irish? If I had asked you for Italian sausage, would you ask me if I was Italian?" demanded the Irishman indignantly. "Or if I asked for German bratwurst, would you ask me if I was German?" Warming to his theme, he went on. Or if I asked you for a kosher hot dog, would you ask me if I was Jewish? Or if I asked you for a taco, would you ask me if I was Mexican? Would you, eh? The assistant said, well, no. Encouraged by the success of his logic, the Irishman stepped his argument up a gear. And if I asked you for frog's legs, would you ask me if I was French? What about Danish bacon? Would you ask me if I was Danish? Well, no, I probably wouldn't, conceded the assistant. Bursting with righteous indignation, the Irishman said, so why then did you ask me if I'm Irish just because I asked for Irish sausages? The assistant replied, because this is a hardware store. So a married Irishman went into the confessional and said to his priest, I almost had an affair with another woman. The priest said, what do you mean, almost? The Irishman said, well, we got undressed and rubbed together, but then I stopped. The priest said, rubbing together is the same as putting it in. You're not to see that woman again. For your penance, say 5 Hail Marys and put $50 in the poor box. The Irishman left the confessional, said his prayers, and then walked over to the poor box. He paused for a moment and then started to leave. The priest, who was watching, quickly ran over to him, saying, I saw that. You didn't put any money in the poor box. The Irishman replied, yeah, but I rubbed the $50 on the box, and according to you, that's the same as putting it in. So an Englishman, a Scotsman, and an Irishman were without tickets for the opening ceremony of the Summer Olympics, but hoped to be able to talk their way in at the gate. Security was very tight, however, and each of their attempts was met with a stern refusal. While wandering around outside the stadium, the Englishman came upon a construction site which gave him an idea. Grabbing a length of scaffolding, he presented himself at the gate and said, Johnson, the pole vault, and was admitted. The Scotsman, overhearing this, went at once to search the site. When he came up with a sledgehammer, he presented himself at the gate and said, McTavish, the hammer. He was also admitted. The Irishman combed the site for an hour and was nearly ready to give up when he spotted his ticket in. Seizing a roll of barbed wire, he presented himself at the gate and announced, O'Sullivan, fencing. So, 3 dead bodies turn up at a mortuary, all with very big smiles on their faces, and the police call on the coroner to investigate. First body, says the coroner, Pierre Dubois, Frenchman, 70, died of heart failure while making love to his 20-year-old mistress. Hence the smile, says the coroner. Second body is Gregory Campbell, Scotsman, 25, who won $50,000 in the lottery. Spent it all on whiskey. Died of alcohol poisoning. Hence the smile. He says. The police inspector asked, so what about this third body? Ah, says the coroner, this is the most unusual one. Paddy Murphy, Irish, 30, struck by lightning. Why the broad grin, then? Inquires the inspector. He thought he was having his picture taken. So at the National Art Gallery in Dublin, a husband and wife were staring at a portrait that had them completely confused. The painting depicted 3 black men totally naked, sitting on a bench. 2 of the figures had black manhood, but the one in the middle had a pink one. The curator of the gallery realized that they were having trouble interpreting the painting and offered his personal assessment. He went on for over half an hour, explaining how it depicted the sexual emasculation of African Americans in a predominantly white patriarchal society. In fact, he pointed out, Some serious critics believe that the pink manhood also reflects the cultural and sociological oppression experienced by black men in contemporary society. After the curator left, an Irishman approached the couple and said, "Would you like to know what the painting is really about?" "Now, why would you claim to be more of an expert than the curator of the gallery?" asked the couple. "Because I am the artist who painted the picture," he replied. "In fact, there are no African Americans depicted at all. They're just 3 Irish coal miners. The guy in the middle went home for lunch." So my 80-year-old Irish grandmother once told me, "You know, there's only a slight difference between an Irish wedding and an Irish funeral." I asked, "And what's that?" She said, "One less drunkard at the funeral." So, a secret agent is sent to Ireland to deliver a top-secret package. Go to this small town in Ireland. Find our agent named O'Malley and say the following to him. "The shadows of the moon are getting dark." He'll reply, "But the sun will guarantee the light." When he says that, give him the package and head home. So the agent goes to the small Irish town but only sees a handful of shops and a farm. He walks up to the farmer and says, "I'm looking for a man named O'Malley." The farmer replies, "You need to be more specific than that. The bank manager is named O'Malley. The butcher is O'Malley. The undertaker is O'Malley. And for that matter, I'm O'Malley too." Hearing that, he says to the farmer in a hushed voice, "The shadows of the moon are getting dark." The farmer replies, "Oh, you're looking for O'Malley, the spy. He lives in the next community west." So an Irishman was out on the course, trying to learn golf, and he was having a terrible time of it. Shot after shot went wide, short, or straight into the rough. Finally, in frustration, he threw down his club and muttered aloud, "I'd give just about anything to get this right." At that very moment, a puff of smoke rose from the ground, and the devil himself appeared beside him. With a sly grin, the devil asked, "Anything?" The Irishman jumped, but then straightened his cap. "Well," he said cautiously, "short of selling my soul, yes." The devil leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "How about giving up making love for the rest of your life?" The Irishman barely hesitated. Done and done. From that moment on, his swing was flawless. He played the rest of the game in rare good form, every shot smooth and straight. Before long, rumor of his miraculous improvement spread through the clubhouse. One of the members, a reporter, saw a story in it. He approached the Irishman after the game and asked, "Sir, is it true you made a deal with the devil to become a great golfer?" The Irishman adjusted his jacket and said, "True enough." "And you gave up on making love as part of the bargain?" The reporter pressed. "True again," the Irishman replied proudly. The reporter flipped open his notebook. "And may I have your name, sir?" The Irishman smiled, tipped his cap, and said, "Certainly. Father Mike O'Ryan." So an Irishman was drinking in a bar in London when he gets a call on his mobile phone. He orders drinks for everybody in the bar as he announces his wife has just produced a typical Irish baby boy weighing 25 pounds. Nobody can believe that any new baby can weigh in at 25 pounds, but the man just shrugs. "That's about average, up our way, folks. Like I said, my boy's a typical Tipperary baby boy." 2 weeks later, the man returns to the bar. The bartender says, "Say, you're the father of that typical Irish baby that weighed 25 pounds at birth, aren't you?" Everybody's been making bets about how big he'd be in 2 weeks. "So how much does he weigh now?" The proud father answers, £17. The bartender is puzzled and concerned. What happened? He was £25 the day he was born. The father takes a slow swig of his Jameson Irish whiskey, wipes his lips on his shirt sleeve, leans into the bartender and proudly says, "Had him circumcised." So a Texan walks into a pub in Ireland and, trying to get everyone's attention, says loudly, "I hear you Irish are a bunch of hard drinkers. I'll give $500 American to anyone here who can drink 10 pints of Guinness back to back." The pub falls silent, and no one steps forward to take the challenge. After a moment, one man quietly gets up and leaves the pub. About 30 minutes later, the same man returns, taps the Texan on the shoulder, and asks, "Is your bet still on?" The Texan nods and eagerly tells the bartender to line up 10 pints of Guinness. Without hesitation, the Irishman downs all 10 pints, one after the other. The pub erupts in cheers as the Texan watches in disbelief. Impressed, the Texan hands over the $500 and asks, "If you don't mind me asking, where did you go for those 30 minutes? The Irishman grins and replies, "Oh, I had to pop down to the pub around the corner to see if I could do it first." So, an Irishman named O'Malley went to his doctor after a long illness. The doctor sighed and looked O'Malley in the eye and said, "I've some bad news for you. You have cancer, and it can't be cured. You'd best put your affairs in order." O'Malley was shocked, but being a solid character, he managed to compose himself and walk from the doctor's office into the waiting room, where his son was waiting. "Well, son, we Irish celebrate when things are good, and we celebrate when things don't go well. In this case, things aren't so well. I have cancer. Let's head to the pub and have a few pints." After 3 or 4 pints, the two were feeling a little less somber. There were some laughs and some more beers. They were eventually approached by some of O'Malley's friends, who were curious as to what the two were celebrating. O'Malley told them they were drinking to his impending end. He told his friends, "I have been diagnosed with AIDS." The friends gave O'Malley their condolences, and they had a couple of more beers. After the friends left, O'Malley's son leaned over and whispered his confusion. "Dad, I thought you told me that you were dying of cancer, and you just told your friends that you were dying of AIDS." O'Malley said, "I don't want any of them sleeping with your mother after I'm gone." So a group of Irish lads are out in Spain on holidays. On one of their nights out, they encountered a young man from Dublin. He was so drunk that he could hardly stand. The lads asked him his name, and he said, "Philip Maguire." The lads told him, "It's not safe being here on your own. We are going to look after you." So for the rest of the holiday, the lads looked after Philip. He was filled with booze day in and day out. Philip tried to explain something to them, but the lads just said, "Don't you worry, pal. You are in good hands. We're going to look after and make sure that you have a great holiday." When the holiday was over, the lads took Philip back with them. "Which part of Dublin are you from?" they asked him. "Ballyfermot," he muttered. So they headed to Ballyfermot and went to the address that Philip had given them. When they arrived, one of the lads went to check if it was the correct address. He went up to the door and rang the bell. A woman answered. "Hello, can I help you?" "Yes," the lads answered. "I was wondering, is this the home of Philip Maguire?" "Why, yes, it is. But he's not here. He is over in Spain on his honeymoon." So an Englishman, a Scotsman, and an Irishman are all spies and are caught behind enemy lines. They are tried and sentenced to death by firing squad. The Scotsman and the Irishman look out from the window of their cell as the Englishman is led out and tied to the pole. As the firing squad is about to shoot, the Englishman yells out, "Tornado! Tornado!" The firing squad panic and run off to wait the tornado out. Meanwhile, the Englishman manages to escape. Later, the Irishman looks out from the window of the cell as the Scotsman is led out and tied to the pole. Seeing what the Englishman did, the Scotsman devises his own plan. As the firing squad is about to shoot, the Scotsman yells out, "Earthquake! Earthquake!" And again, all of the firing squad scatter to wait it out. Meanwhile, the Scotsman escapes. Finally, the Irishman is led out and tied to the pole. The Irishman, being the genius he is, devises his own plan. As the firing squad is about to shoot, he yells out, "Fire! Fire!" So a Scotsman, an Englishman, and an Irishman walk into a bar. The Scotsman says, "As good as this bar is, I still prefer the pubs back home. In Glasgow, there is this place. The landlord goes out of his way for the locals. When you buy 4 drinks, he'll buy the 5th drink." "Well," said the Englishman, "at my local in London, the barman will buy you your 3rd drink after you buy the first 2. "Ah, that's nothing," said the Irishman. "Back home in my favorite pub, the moment you set foot in the place, they'll buy you a drink, then another, all the drinks you like, actually. Then, when you've had enough drinks, they'll take you upstairs and there you get laid, all on the house." The Englishman and Scotsman were suspicious of the claims. The Irishman swore every word was true. Then the Englishman asked, "Did this actually happen to you?" "Not to me, personally, no," admitted the Irishman. "But it did happen to my sister quite a few times." So an Irishman and a Scot are going for a walk around the countryside. They come up to a cottage about a mile along the way and notice a sheep with its head stuck in the fence. The Scot looks over at the Irishman and says, "Well, what are you waiting for?" He lifts his kilt and starts having his way with the sheep. Once finished, he looks over at the Irishman and says again, "What are you waiting for?" The Irishman then rams his head through the fence and gets stuck. So there was once a very successful farmer from Texas who started gaining interest in his ancestry. After doing some digging, he traced his lineage back to a small town in Ireland. And lo and behold, they were a family of farmers. So he packed his bags and took a trip to Ireland to visit the small town to see if he could track down some of his kin. After landing in Dublin and driving an hour outside of the city, he stopped in a pub to grab a drink and start asking around about his family. The Texan sat down, ordered a pint, and started talking to the Irishman sitting at the bar. After explaining his story and the purpose of the trip, the Irishman responded, "You don't say. I've never heard of your family, but I'm a farmer as well. Tell me, what's it like farming in Texas?" "Gladly," the Texan said. "Farming in Texas has been quite lucrative for me. If you started out in the morning and drove west, you could drive all day before you reached the end of my property. And if you started the next day and drove east all day, you wouldn't reach the end of my property. Same thing north and south. You could drive either direction all day and you wouldn't reach the end of my farmland." "Ah, I know what you mean," said the Irishman. "I've got a tractor like that as well." So an Irish priest was transferred to Texas. Father O'Malley rose from his bed one morning. It was a fine spring day in his new West Texas Mission parish. He walked to the window of his bedroom to get a deep breath of the beautiful day outside. He then noticed there was a jackass lying dead in the middle of his front lawn. He promptly called the local police station. The conversation went like this. "Good morning. This is Sergeant Jones. How might I help you? And the best of the day to yourself. This is Father O'Malley at St. Anne's Catholic Church. There's a jackass lying dead in me front lawn, and would ye be so kind as to send a couple o' your lads to take care of the matter?" Sergeant Jones, considering himself to be quite a wit and recognizing the Irish accent, thought he would have a little fun with the good father, replied, "Well, now, Father, it was always my impression that you people took care of the last rites." There was dead silence on the line for a moment. Father O'Malley then replied, "Aye, this is certainly true, but we are also obliged to notify the next of kin first, which is the reason for my call." So 3 Irish triplets walk into a bar named Paddy, Mick, and Tat. That makes his way to the bathroom, leaving Paddy and Mick to order the first round. Mick asks the bartender for 3 pints of Guinness, and whilst he's pouring, he inquisitively asks, "Are you 3 triplets?" "Yes, we are," answers Mick. "But how can that be? You 2 are 6'3", and the other fella in the bathroom is 4 foot nothing," replies the bartender. "Well," explains Paddy, "Mick and I were breastfed, but there was no tit for tat." So an Irishman who had a little to drink is driving home from the city one night, and, of course, his car is weaving violently all over the road. A cop pulls him over. "So," says the cop to the driver, "where have you been?" "Why, I've been to the pub, of course," slurs the drunk. "Well," says the cop, "it looks like you've had quite a few to drink this evening." "I did all right," the drunk says with a smile. "Did you know," says the cop, standing straight and folding his arms across his chest, "that a few intersections back, your wife fell out of your car?" "Oh, thank heavens," sighs the drunk. "For a minute there, I thought I'd gone deaf." So it's First World War, and there are 2 trenches 200 meters apart, one occupied by Germans, the other by an Irish regiment. There's a stalemate. Nobody has shot anybody for a whole week. On both sides, they are getting very bored. Mick says to Paddy, "I have an idea. What's the most common name in Germany?" Paddy says, "Gunther. I'd say it's Gunther." Mick says, "Right. Here's what we'll do. You get your rifle ready and I'll shout across no man's land, 'Gunther, are you there?' And when one of them sticks, he's head up, you shoot him, right?" Paddy says, "Great idea. Let's try it." So, Paddy gets ready and Mick shouts across to the German trenches, "Hey Gunther, are you there?" Up pops a German's head and bang, Paddy shoots him. The 2 of them can't believe it worked, so Paddy says, "Try it again, Mick." Mick shouts out, "Gunther! Hey, Gunther!" Again, a German head pops up and again, bang, Paddy shoots him. They can't believe their luck, and 7 more times they do it, and each time a head pops up and Paddy shoots him. The Germans are getting a bit sick of this, so Fritz says to his buddy, Herman, "What is the most common name in Ireland?" Herman says, "I believe it is Paddy. Yes, it is definitely Paddy. Of this I am sure." Fritz says, "We will play them at their own game. You get ready to shoot, and I will call out the name Paddy." So Herman gets ready and Fritz shouts across no man's land, "Paddy, I want to have a word with you, please." No answer comes back. No head pops up, so he tries again. "Paddy, can you hear me? Are you still there?" Still no answer, so he shouts across again. "Paddy, are you there?" The voice answers back. Is that you, Gunther? So once upon a time in the Emerald Isle, a man named O'Reilly applied for a forklift job at a famous Irish firm in Dublin. Simultaneously, a Norwegian man named Sven also applied for the same position. As fate would have it, both O'Reilly and Sven had similar qualifications, which led the company to administer a test to determine the best candidate. The manager led the two applicants to a quiet room with no interruptions and provided them with the exam. When the results were in, both O'Reilly and Sven had scored 19 out of 20. The manager approached O'Reilly and said, "Thank you for coming to the interview, but we've decided to give the Norwegian the job." Perplexed, O'Reilly replied, "But why? We both got 19 questions correct. As this is Ireland and I'm Irish, shouldn't I be the one to get the job?" The manager explained, "We have made our decision not on the correct answers, but on the question you both got wrong. How could one incorrect answer be better than another?" inquired O'Reilly. The manager smiled and said, "That's simple. On question number 7, the Norwegian wrote, 'I don't know.' You, on the other hand, wrote, 'Neither do I.'" So, 3 men died on Christmas Eve and were met by St. Peter at the pearly gates. "To enter the gates of heaven," he declared, "you must each present an item that symbolizes Christmas." The Englishman, eager to prove his worth, reached into his pockets and produced a lighter. He flicked it on and proclaimed, "It's a candle." St. Peter, pleased with the man's resourcefulness, allowed him to pass through the pearly gates. Next, the Scotsman rummaged through his pockets and retrieved a set of keys. He shook them vigorously and announced, "They're bells." Again, St. Peter was satisfied and granted the Scotsman passage into heaven. Finally, the Irishman, in a state of growing anxiety, frantically searched his pockets. At last, he found a pair of women's panties. St. Peter, with a raised eyebrow, inquired, "And just what do those symbolize?" The Irishman, without missing a beat, replied, "These are carols."